Good afternoon. This is Dyke Hendrickson, the host of a podcast known as Life Along the Merrimack. We meet every week and we talk about the history and the health of the Merrimack River. Today, I've wanted to talk about the Coast Guard, but also a program involving the Coast Guard. I wrote a book not too long ago called New England Coast Guard Stories, Remarkable Mariners. And in recent weeks, I've been decided to give these books out in a certain deliberate way. Each week, I'm going to give several books away, and I'm going to do this by putting them in these temporary library boxes that exist in Newburyport. Now, they are in different places along roads and parks. There's one on the waterfront near the harbor master's office. There is one on High Street. There is a box on Marlborough Street. And there is also a box on Johnson Street. Of course, there might be more than that, but those are the ones that I know. So each week, each Tuesday, I'm going to be putting a book in there. And it's a free book. It costs $22 at the store. But my thinking is this. My contract with a foundation here in town enables me to write books. And part of the elements of this is that I should give away some of the books so that people can read about the history of Newburyport. And I did this several weeks ago around the holidays, and I gave 12 or 15 books to the Coast Guard station down on the waterfront. They really appreciated it. I got a nice letter from the commander of the Coast Guard station, and he said, you know, the Coasties really liked it. Some of them read it. Some of them passed along as a gift. So I thought, why don't I continue in this mode and go to these small library boxes around town and put one or two copies in each week. Again, it's new, it hasn't been used, and it'll be a way for people to learn history of Newburyport. And it really is a very exciting history, and I'm going to just go over a few points of it. But let it be known that this week starts a giveaway of a few books each week in the library boxes in town. Now, this is Life Along the Merrimack, 96.3 Joppa Radio, and also Comcast local cable. And so I feel, you know, it's a privilege for me to be able to talk about the river, to talk about the Coast Guard, and different things like that. And one of the elements that I wanted to mention today is I was away for a couple of weeks in Florida. I visited my sister in New Smyrna Beach, Florida. That's about 10 miles below Daytona Beach. And I did not go to the Daytona 500, but I did see a lot of beautiful seashore. And the reason I mention New Smyrna Beach is it's very much like Newburyport and Plum Island. It has a about 11-mile barrier island right off the community itself, just like we have here in Newburyport. The northern part of the island has houses and condos and restaurants, just like we do here. And the southern part of the island has about 6 miles of national wildlife refuge, just like we do here. So I feel like I'm home when I'm down there. But the great thing about the park down there, and it's called Canaveral National Seashore, and they have many pelicans and a good amount of armadillos. Now, I don't think we have pelicans. I may have missed something, but I know I have never seen an armadillo on Plum Island. But this is a great excitement for me to drive along. You see them on the side of the road. And of course, I think they're related to the anteater because their nose is always down. They're getting ants, they're getting grubs, they're doing whatever they're doing. They're very cute. But I must say this, Don't try. You cannot pick up armadillos. I say this without joshing because you can get leprosy from picking up an armadillo. I know you didn't know that, but leprosy is also known as Hansen disease. And I've always known this since I've started going down there. But since so few people down there have even heard of this, I looked it up online and Wikipedia and found out that indeed Hansen's disease can be transferred by armadillos. So I don't go near the armadillos. I look at them. I don't even get out of the car to take a photo because what a bummer to come home here to Newburyport with leprosy. That would not be good. I did once visit a leper colony, however. This is years ago when I lived in Hawaii. I was flying from Hawaii to Kauai, I think, and there was a stop in Molokai. And one of the only two leper colonies in this country was on Molokai in the islands. I did not get out of the plane, but they stopped there. These small planes stop there. They drop off mail, they drop off papers and food, whatever. And so it's all very, they're under control. They have medical care. The other leper colony is in southern Louisiana. As I understand it, you may have heard of Father Damien. He was actually lionized for his work with lepers in Molokai and became one of the great Americans in medical history for his devotion to these individuals and to the work that he did. But that's my story. I had a good week. Every day I went to the wildlife refuge. There are tremendous birds there. Now, I know we have great birds on Plum Island, but they have pelicans. They have many different kind of birds that we don't have. They also have a river. They have the American River that flows very close to the island there. So New Smyrna Beach in Florida is quite like Newburyport here in Massachusetts. It was a very good time. And one of the things about Massachusetts that we have that they don't have is Newburyport is the birthplace of the Coast Guard. And I just wanted to show a few slides about the Coast Guard. I did go to the Coast Guard Center in New Smyrna Beach. In Florida, the Coast Guard is extremely busy. We're busy here in New England, but they have so many more vessels on the water and frankly, so much more drug smuggling that they have a longer season and they're very busy. So I visited the Coast Guard station in New Smyrna Beach, and here is what the first Coast Guard vessel looked like. About 60 feet long, the Massachusetts. It was created to stop smuggling and to collect duties during the late 18th century. And the father of the Coast Guard is Alexander Hamilton. He was a key element of the play Hamilton. And of course, in 1789, he went to President George Washington and said, look, I am the Secretary of the Treasury. We don't have any money in the Treasury. Washington said, well, do you have a suggestion? Alexander Hamilton said, yes. Let's have a fleet of revenue cutters that can stop the smuggling, collect tariffs from the ships coming into Newburyport, Marblehead, New York, Annapolis, everywhere, and we will have money. Hamilton was a very brilliant man. The idea worked, and because the first of the 10 revenue cutters was built in Newburyport, that is why Newburyport is known as the center, the birthplace of the Coast Guard. And there's always a squabble about this. Salem, Massachusetts, Marblehead, Annapolis, New York, they've all kind of laid claim. But President Lyndon Johnson, in 1965, signed a document that declared that the Coast Guard was actually, the birthplace is Newburyport because the Massachusetts was built there. So take that to the bank. Newburyport is the birthplace of the Coast Guard. Here's a monument suggesting that this is the birthplace of the Coast Guard. It's not that large. It's on the waterfront here in town. I I think I lived here 10 years before I even noticed it, but there it is, birthplace of the Coast Guard. And if you've been down to the waterfront in recent years, it really has been improved. It looks wonderful. In the foreground here, the monument to 7 young men, fishermen from this area who lost their lives in fishing boats on the Atlantic since 2000. I think they've done a very nice job with it. And I spent a lot of time there, and many people stop and are quite reverent when they see the names of these young men who lost their lives in fishing boats. When we talk about losing lives and when we talk about saving lives, one of the biggest stories in the last decade or two is the sinking of the Bounty. This was a tall ship. It had been to Newburyport. It had been refitted in Boothbay Harbor, Maine in the fall of 2012. It was heading down to Florida to make a financial deal, how they can get tourists on, how they could make some money off it because it's privately owned. And it went into Superstorm Sandy. And you can see that it's starting to sink here off of the coast of North Carolina. The captain of the Bounty was Robin Wallbridge, as you can see, and he did not heed the good advice that he had. Now, even though the vessel was older, it's built in 1960 for the movie Mutiny on the Bounty, it had very good technology. It had internet, it had weather systems, it had weather reports coming to it each hour. He essentially ignored them and thought he could, he was aware that Superstorm Sandy was very large and very threatening. He thought he would go east, though, to get out of the way of the storm and then tack back to Florida. This proved to be a very fatal decision. 2 people were lost, Robin Waldridge and Claudine Christian. She is shown here. She was 42. She was not a mariner, as we know mariners to be. She was a kind of a free spirit. She thought she'd be on the vessel for a few months as an experience. But all in all, the Coast Guard did a very good job in rescuing. It rescued 14 of the 16 people involved. Captain Waldridge's body was never found. Her body was found. It was rushed to a helicopter to medical facilities in North Carolina, but she did not survive. So 14 of 16 were saved by the Coast Guard. One of the heroes was Coast Guard co-pilot Jane Pena, who, like others, was wakened at 5 a.m. and said, "We've got an emergency, get ready and start flying." And she was very helpful to me in my book. And I asked her in one of several interviews, "What did you think at 5 a.m.? That not only that, you have to eat breakfast in a hurry, but you would have to fly into a hurricane." And the first thing she said is, we all went online. We looked to see what the vessel looked like. No one had ever seen the ship, and we didn't think anything was out there. I mean, how could we? It was a terrible storm. But the other thing she said, we're trained to do this. We're ready to do this. We're trained to do it. And so we all started our work, and we knew where it was. There had been a couple fixed wing craft airplanes of the Coast Guard out the day before. And so they saw the vessel. They were in communication with the vessel, but of course, an airplane can't stop and rescue anybody. So they said, at dawn, we will send out a rescue chopper. So Jane and other people knew where the vessel was, and they started at 5 a.m. into a hurricane. This is an actual shot of a rescue team member going into the water. He's a swimmer. He was dropping into 40-foot seas. The gusts were 60 knots. It was a tremendously challenging moment. And it's very hard to qualify for this rescue swimmer, as you can imagine. But he did get to the rescue. He did get to the lifeboats. And I would mention the lifeboats had awnings on them or covers. So there was tremendous waves, tremendous blow going on, but those, very timid souls, scared souls in the rescue vessels had something over their head. So they were able to get there. This is not a picture from this rescue, but it shows what it looks like to rescue people. So it's an example of, there are the people waiting, there is the swimmer going down, and this is what actually happened in the Atlantic. When we talk about rescues, the whole story of it starts about 1788. The Humane Society started in Massachusetts and grew thereafter. Here's a wonderful, this is a photograph from 1892 off of Plum Island. You can see the boat going out in the foreground, and this ship was in tough circumstances, and the rescue was underway. And I talk about Joppa Radio. This is Joppa Radio 96.3. I am Dyke Hendrickson, the host of this podcast, which is Life Along the Merrimack, and we're also on local cable, Channel 9. And this is another rescue of the Coast Guard, 1952. You may have seen it lionized in the movie The Finest Hours. This happens more frequently. A Coast Guard vessel will go out. You'll see something like this craft, and they'll talk to them. Did you run out of gas? Did you lose rudder? And the Coast Guard probably will not tow it in. Since 9/11, they have this, they do less towing and more security work, but they would call a third party in, like Towboat USA, and they have it brought in. But this is what a modern day rescue might look like. Here's an old salt. This is one of Joshua James, and he certainly looks like an old salt. He was from the South Shore of Massachusetts, saved many lives in the old days, and there have been vessels named after him, the Joshua James. Ida Lewis was another lifesaver. She was from Rhode Island off of Newport. Her family lived at a lighthouse, and so that's why she became so active. But she is also one of the heroes of life-saving in New England. This is a artistic rendering of Ida Lewis, and you can see, how dangerous things could be, but she was certainly a hero. Sumner Kimball was the bureaucrat, if you will, who started the mechanics of putting the Coast Guard together. The service was not called the Coast Guard until 1915, when the life-saving service merged with the revenue cutter service. In 1939, those two merged with the lighthouse service. So 1915 is when we hear the word Coast Guard, and 1939 is the year that all came together for the modern Coast Guard. Women started in a small way in the Coast Guard in 1918. Here are the Baker twins in Washington, D.C. They were clerics. Going up chronologically in 1929, the Coast Guard had one of its most challenging tasks, and that was to stop rum running during the era of Prohibition. And to your left, you can see a vessel with whiskey and beer on it. To the right, those two are Coast Guard vessels. But this was a tremendous job for the Coast Guard. Prohibition was from 1920 to 1933. I have several stories in my book about the Coast Guard that relate to smuggling right off of Plum Island. In fact, a coaster was killed by friendly fire off of Plum Island. And in my book, and if you get a free book in one of the library stands, you'll learn all about it. Women didn't really join the Coast Guard until 1940, 41. The war had started, and they took in close to 12,000 women between 1940 and 1946. That's an enormous amount. They were very helpful. They were called SPARs, and they were tremendous service to the whole organization. In 46, most women were mustered out. There weren't any women, noticeably, from 46 states, say, to 1976. In 1976, the Coast Guard Academy started taking women to be officers. And since then, women have been part of the Coast Guard. And I understand there were only 39 women taken in the class of 1976 in the Coast Guard Academy. But I understand the last Coast Guard class in 1920 and 2021 had 40% women. So the number of women is certainly growing. The Coast Guard itself in actives has about 42,000 people nationwide. About 6,000 are women. So that is a low percentage, but it is certainly grown quite a bit since 1976. The Eagle is one of the Coast Guard's tall ships. This was taken from the Germans in the 30s, and it became a war prize for the US in 1946. And here is one of the greatest shots in my book, which just shows the majesty of the Eagle, and it shows a chopper, which is also such a valuable tool. Now, helicopters weren't perfected or put into use until the early 40s. And so the Coast Guard, once helicopters became in use in the 40s, began using that to great advantage. One of the biggest stories in Coast Guard history is response to 9/11. They did a tremendous job. And here is one of those staggering photos where one of the Twin Towers is on fire. And the Coast Guard did a tremendous job that day. They rescued people from New York City. They had vessels come down from New Jersey, Connecticut, Ohio, all along the coast. And so the Coast Guard saved thousands on that given day. One of the things I did with my book is look at individuals, and I'll talk about that next week. I will continue this discussion a little bit next week, but I wanted to go over some of this is just one of the individuals that I focused on. Patrick Brown, he was a commanding officer at Station Merrimack on Water Street, and he left a couple years ago. As I believe coasties are rotated frequently, and he has a lot of promise. He went to Washington, and now I understand he's been promoted from there. But he had, when I met him, I said, Patrick, I've always heard that if a 47-footer, and that's one behind him, as you can see, flips over in bad weather, I've always heard that it'll come up and it'll still be running. Could that possibly be true? And he said, well, I know it to be true because I was giving a qualifying test to a coastie out on the West Coast. This young coastie took a wave broadside, and we did go over. Everyone was strapped in. There were no injuries, no losses. But he said the trip back to shore was the quietest and most embarrassing I've ever been through, because this young cadet was so mortified that he had flipped a 47-footer. He just could barely function. But I let him take the controls. We watched carefully. We got back. And I just said to him, this could happen to anybody. There's no loss of life, no injury. Keep your studies going. We'll do this again sometime. So I think that was some good compassion on the part of Patrick Brown, and also shows, some goodwill by coasties. Now, in my book about the Coast Guard, I interviewed about 50 coasties from northern Maine to southern Connecticut, and I found them to be very open, very patriotic. They want to help their country. And so that's a key reason why they joined the Coast Guard. So I'm going to keep going with this next week. I'm Dyke Hendrickson. This is Life Along the Merrimack. I want to remind you there will be free books in the little library stands we have here in Newburyport. It's part of my grant, so I can keep researching the Merrimack River and the Coast Guard. And we'll continue this next week. Again, this is 96.3 radio, local cable cast, Comcast television. The show is Life Along the Merrimack. I am Dyke Hendrickson, and we'll talk again next week. Thank you for being here.